You're listening to the Art Said Podcast, Season 2, Episode number 16, a conversation with Trevor Bryan. Welcome to the Art Said Podcast, conversations through the perspective of the arts and education, hosted by educators and artists Shauna Longo and Edric DeBose. All right, everybody, we are so excited today to be back talking with you, and we've got our friend Trevor Bryan here, who is a visual art teacher in the Jackson Public Schools in New Jersey. How are you doing, Trevor?
I'm doing well. How are you?
We are good. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you.
Absolutely. Edric and I have known Trevor for quite some time now, many years, and interacted, and our paths have crossed and intersected in many different ways over the years. So we're happy to have you on the podcast talking about your work, because you've really kind of put your own stamp on the work you've done with visual art and literacy. And so we're excited to bring that to our audience today. So tell us about, what was the first experience that made you want to make art?
So I've made art my whole life. The first drawing I have, I think I was 3 or 4. It's in my picture album from when I was a kid. So I've always made stuff, and that really, it's never stopped. I enjoy making stuff. So it's as far back as I remember. I was a maker and a creator.
Was there someone in particular that encouraged you, or a situation that really allowed you to focus? Or
my parents obviously always supported it.
Okay.
I liked picture books my whole life. Bill Pete, who was he was a writer and illustrator. I used to collect his books when I was a kid. He was an animator for Walt Disney, and then he started publishing picture books later. But he was an animator and a director for Walt Disney. I just love the stories that he wrote, and I love the illustrations. I copied his illustrations all the time as a kid, all kinds of mediums, and that's like the farthest back I remember, like really making stuff. But Bill Pete was a big.
Well, it's interesting for me that you're talking about somebody who's an illustrator and the idea of storytelling through pictures, because it seems
yes.
Kind of a tangent of you picked up on and carried through later with your work.
Yep. Yeah.
So tell us about the literacy program that you developed, and then the book that came along with that, The Art of Comprehension. And listeners, if you don't have the book, go on Amazon. I'm telling you, it is an amazing read. Fantastic work.
Thank you. So that work, I mean, I've been a teacher for about 25 years. And when I went into teaching, I was an art major in school with the idea that I was going to teach afterwards. And originally, I wanted to be a classroom teacher. I thought I'd be a classroom teacher because I really thought that the arts were underutilized. And I felt that we could get more out of the arts and that they could be more useful in the academic arena. And so I originally started trying to go into being a classroom teacher and bring the arts as much as I could in the curriculum. And I realized very quickly that it was there was so much to do, and it was so overwhelming that path I just hit too many roadblocks early. But I always just had that sense almost that the arts were being underutilized, and I really wanted to figure out a way to connect art to the main curriculum in authentic ways. And so I spent a long time searching for that. It took me about 10 years into my career, where although I was familiar with them, the connection really wasn't made until I happened to be in a workshop in reading comprehension skills. And the way that they wanted kids to talk about stories sounded a lot like the way that I talked about art with like my artist friends. And I kind of thought that for the kids who really didn't read well, the striving readers, that we could get at a lot of those ideas and get them comfortable with the ideas and that way of thinking, the habits of mind that they needed for strong reading comprehension through artwork. And so I started going into a inclusion class, and that's where we started. It was a 4th grade inclusion class, and we really started looking at artwork as a way of getting kids to engage meaningful with reading comprehension. And that's kind of really started. So that was around 2012. And so I've been kind of working on that and exploring that and, developing all those ideas since then.
As you were developing that, So I'm curious about you. You said you were running into roadblocks. What were some of those roadblocks? Were they some?
So one of the big roadblocks was I did not have, so my art education background, my art background, right? So not art education in the sense of teaching, but the education I received as an art major, someone who's serious with art, did not lend itself well to talking about art in elementary schools or like middle schools. I didn't have the language. And so when I found the reading comprehension language, and I was able to adapt that in terms of looking at pictures, I was able to speak to a much wider range of educators than what my art education, my formal art education, right, allowed me. So that was one of the big roadblocks that I was able to kind of break through. Just having common language that we could use so that the ideas sounded familiar to people that didn't have an art background.
And I'm sure that like you got some flack from people like, what's the art teacher? Who does he think he is talking to us about how to teach literacy? But the way you're approaching it through the art lens, to me, is what brings that validity in it. I'm sure you heard that, correct?
Yeah, there's always been, especially in the beginning, years ago. And it's still, some people still can't wrap their brain around the fact that an art teacher would be talking about literacy. But the reality is, right, like artists in the arts, right, we're storytellers, and there's a long, right, like going back to stained glass windows, that were telling Bible stories before the public was literate. The role that music plays in developing movies, even silent films, right? The piano
Absolutely.
player, right? So the arts, the idea that artists, visual artists, musicians, right? The actors are artists, people who do set design, right? They're all artists, right? And we're all part of the storytelling machine, right? And humans are storytelling animals. So I just really see writing as one part of the way that one way that we tell stories, but music tells stories, and dance tells stories.
Absolutely.
Visual arts tell stories. I mean, you go into any elementary school, most of the books are probably picture books, right? And so there's people like Peter Reynolds, Jarrett Lerner, Bill Peet, right? These authors. Patricia Polacco is another great example of someone who really just tells stories both visually and written. And so that there's a long history there. And I think just really kind of bringing that to the forefront, right, it kind of opens doors for teachers and for students.
Right. Well, and you're putting it in a way that the students can better understand it too, right? That they can start to feel comfortable learning vocabulary and building that vocabulary to be able to speak and to write and to read.
Right. Yeah, and there's I always give the example that if you read a play in English class, it's an academic pursuit, but if the drama club puts a play on, right, it's not they don't consider that close reading. And I would argue that putting a play on is about as close of a read as you can to any story, where you're really diving deep and talking about how you're going to play the scene and what the scene means and the direction and how we're going to do this and blah blah blah, and what elements you're going to bring in. But that's a close read, right? But it's not seen as an academic endeavor for some reason.
Absolutely. Right? You are absolutely right. So your work seems to focus a lot on mood. So how does the idea of mood fit into the arts for you?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's like a breakthrough, but the way that all of this sort of started was this realization that stories are really told through mood. Is kind of generally how I describe it, that every story is really about how a character feels and why they feel that way. Right. Everyone. Right. And it makes sense, because as humans, we react or respond emotionally to every single thing that happens. Right. If you see anyone walking down the hallway, right, good or bad, right, you're going to have an emotional reaction. There's a great study done on people who had brain injuries, right, and if a certain part of your brain was affected, if that emotional part of your brain was affected, they literally could not pick a cereal out, because it's an emotional decision. And so we respond to everything emotionally. So that, right, so it makes sense from a biological standpoint that we kind of enter stories that way and we talk about it. And it just was a very easy way into story, because it was, right, understanding how the character feels and why they feel that way is important. But then it also became a really good way of talking to art with young kids, and teachers, right? Because so much of the arts that we really respond to it's through the mood, right? The songs that we love that are
Absolutely.
right.
It's that emotional connection.
Yeah, right. And so it all starts with that emotion. And although, right, there's famous paintings that are theoretical, and I think this happens in music as well, that in the arts we tend to have some of the greatest works of art that that we consider are theoretical pieces, but they don't connect to the general public through mood. And so for someone who's not really into the arts or doesn't understand the context that fits in, they're not responding like very well to the piece. But when we enter anything through mood, almost everything has a mood, and that just opens up possibilities for conversations. People understand it, and then we could talk about how the mood was crafted. And so what I do a lot is, especially when we look at artworks, is we're looking at how it was crafted as a way to understand the mood, right? How the mood was created and what the mood is. So we're looking at craft as a pathway into comprehension, and that works for music, painting, stories, dances, whatever, anything that has some sort of narrative element to it.
Absolutely. So we know you have done some work with the Princeton University Art Museum based on your literacy work. Can you share a bit about that collaboration? That's a pretty cool collaboration.
Oh, it was awesome. So it was a great museum. It's under renovation now. I think it's going to be opening up in 2025.
Soon, I heard,
was
right?
Just there. I was kind of walking around it yesterday because I can't wait to go back. They have a really great collection. But my school's about an hour away, and I reached out to the museum for their education department, and we started a conversation. I kind of explained the program, and some of the docents were kind of looking for a different way to connect with school kids with art, other than the typical kind of the lecture that they give, all right, especially for elementary school, middle school classes, but even high school. And so I was able to kind of partner with them to kind of share what I do. To go in, and when the museum was open, I was able to bring my fifth graders there for the last few years, which was a great field trip, my favorite day of the year. And we're really just kind of going through the museum and really talking about the moods of the paintings and how those moods were crafted. And it opens up ways to make text-to-text connections. We can write about those. We can use paintings to help us develop writing skills. And so that collaboration has been great. So hopefully it opens soon, and we can get back into that work.
Absolutely. All right. So tell us about your belief in allowing students to bring their interests and passions into the art room, and then working to help students, each child, use those interests and passions to engage with art making based on their individual skills.
All right. So when we go into the arts, right, I really believe fundamentally, right, the best artists follow their curiosity. And so getting kids to be able to take what they're interested in and then see if we can get them to sort of make something out of that is really what I believe arts education right should push. Getting right, and I think that's true. If you take anyone who's done anything really successfully, right, regardless of the field, what they've basically done is they've taken an interest, they've tried it out and see where it goes. And I think that's the fundamental skill that that as humans, as creators, as beings that want to create and solve problems, that we want to push that. So I think letting kids use their interest and their their curiosity as the starting point as much as possible, and being comfortable saying, hey, I have this idea. I don't know what's going to happen. It might not be good. It might not be, it might not work, but I want to try it. I think that's a good habit for kids to get into. And so that's really what I try and help kids with in my art room.
I love that. I actually was observing an elementary art class today, and one of the boys, where I was sitting in the back of the room, because I'll get up and I'll walk around and I engage with the kids, even though I'm observing the teacher. And when I first started, he came back to throw something away, and under his breath, he's like, well, that didn't work. And I was like, oh, what were you trying? He's like, well, you have to try things, and sometimes they don't work. And so now I'm going to go back and try something else. And I was like, oh my gosh, this kid gets it.
Yeah,
this
awesome.
Kid gets it.
Yep.
And it was very cool. And I shared that with the teacher afterwards, and she was like almost crying because she was so excited. She didn't know that my engagement with him happened in the back of the room, and that he was even going with that mindset, and what she had been teaching like was sticking, and like that he was really taking that on. So I appreciate that so greatly, because not, we know that as kids go through school, they tend to become less creative.
Right.
And so keeping that spark and getting them willing to, make mistakes, screw up, because that's when you learn the most, is so important.
Yeah. Austin Kleon has a great quote that he goes, it doesn't have to be good, it just has to exist. And that
is a great quote.
I believe that for almost everything, right? You just got to make stuff and see what happens. And yet there's really no way of telling whether it's going to resonate with people or lead to something else or whatever it is. You have no idea, right? And answers are found in the work, which is another great quote I like from the book Art and Fear. I think that concept is where I got that. But this idea of just trying stuff out and seeing where it goes. And I think that's right. Like small business owners do that, right? Entrepreneurs do that. And then artists do that all the time. So,
well, and I have to say, I think teachers are afraid to do that because they feel like the stakes are so high. And Edric and I can tell you, we've done that. We've had lessons flop, and then, but out of them came something really cool, but it had to flop before we got it to a place where it worked.
Yeah. And I think the curriculum, right, just generally the academic curriculum has gotten tighter in a lot of areas, right, where there's not space, there's really not time. And so I think having the arts kind of hold on to that space where we provide a little wiggle room for kids to have a little autonomy, to make decisions, to follow their curiosity, to bring their passions in the school is crucial to getting kids to engage meaningfully and find their voice and learn some real skills that I think are very, very valuable once they exit school.
Absolutely.
So I have a professor that because every professor you have this one quote you kind of remember from that professor, and he said the work will come from the work.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Like, you don't have to think about it. Just look at the work, see what it's going, and then what's that next logical step, and that's where it's supposed to go.
Yep.
So in your work, I want to just kind of wrap up. So what motivates you to show up every day? What is that thing that you get that you, because I think as teachers we really need this. We really need to know what it is. What is that thing that motivates you to continue to show up at the classroom and to give the best you can? But what is that?
I think part of it is just my curiosity, right? Like I'm trying, in a lot of ways, I'm just following my curiosity to see, like, can I solve this problem, right? Can I find answers within the work? I think that's it. I think I also historically have struggled to find my own voice creatively in a lot of ways, to find work that I feel is meaningful. And so a lot of my work is just about trying to help others to find their voice, right? So breaking down the process in a way that makes it concrete, right? That allows me to maybe find the steps to get people started, to get kids started or teachers started. And so I think that's really the motivating factors. I'm still on this mission to learn so that I can help others, but also eventually I'm still looking for, my creative voice in a lot of ways, and trying to break it down so I can understand, where things went sideways or a direction that I can go in. But it's I think it boils down to that curiosity, right? Really still being curious, trying to learn, and then seeing if through that experience, my own learning, that I can help other people to learn.
I really like what you said about process, because when you break down the process and then show other people how that process works, then they can take it on themselves. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is also Yo-Yo Ma. He said that, if you love something, you can share it with other people, and then they can begin to love and care for that thing as well.
Yeah. Or just find their own, what they love, right? Because a lot of it's just related, right? But learning how to take that first step on a journey, right? On your own journey, I think is, I think it's really hard for people to do. And I think a lot of times in schools, we don't give kids those opportunities to take their first step. We're kind of telling them the step that they need to go on. And I feel like a lot of times in the learning process, we skip steps for a lot of kids. And we just don't break it down to the smallest, tiniest step we can take. And let's just go from there.
Because we think we know better about where we got to get them versus and however we have to get them there versus taking the time to really figure out how they need to get there.
Yeah. In teaching, we do a lot of we know what to teach, but I don't know if we know how to teach it. right?
Yeah.
I think that's become a problem as the curriculum got harder. We're saying we have to teach these more difficult things, but we don't break these skills or concepts down into small enough bits for kids to be able to understand them, right, and move comfortably through them.
Yeah, we're skipping the basic foundational elements and
Yep.
jumping up, and they don't have, as Edric will say, they don't have the shelf to put it on.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Well, any parting thoughts? Anything we missed and didn't talk about?
No, I think I think we covered a lot in terms of what I do, in terms of what I'm interested in. And we'll see what happens in education in the next few years. We'll see where it goes, where we wind up, what changes, what stays the same, and
Yes.
And we'll just kind of get through that space as best we can. See what happens.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us and for sharing your wisdom and your experience with our audience. We truly appreciate you, and it's always a pleasure to chat with you, Trevor.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Loved it.